Welcome to the Farming Without the Bank podcast, the show with a no BS approach to money, hosted by a farm strategy expert and authorized IBC practitioner. Join us as we get real and expose the flaws of traditional financial institutions in order to help farmers take control of their finances, create peace of mind, grow their wealth, and leave a legacy. Now, here's your host, Mary Jo Irmen.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you very much for being here. Today, I am going to steal Clay Conry's podcast. Clay and I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago for working cows, and we talked about who you should be surrounded with for your financial professionals. And it was so good that there's no reason for me to re-record it. So I am just stealing Clay's podcast and I'm putting it on my channel. So I hope that you guys enjoy it. Here it is. Take a listen.
Mary Jo, thanks for joining me again on the Working Cows podcast. Welcome back.
Thanks. I love being here.
Well, I've been thinking recently kind of about how we strategize within our businesses. And one of the things that I think is important is to have the right people on our team. And most ranches aren't big enough to employ full-time people on all the spaces that a normal business would have somebody there full-time. And so we end up using people who are providing services to fill those roles on a part-time basis kind of. And so today I wanted to focus on the financial team, and we might not have a full-time bookkeeper and tax preparer and all these things on our team, but we do go out and find those people. So who should be on the financial team of the ranch in your perspective? What are some of those key players as far as the financial team of a ranch is concerned? And then we'll just kind of go through and talk about their roles and some of the things that we need to keep in mind when we're managing those relationships.
Okay. Well, first, I think you need a bookkeeper. Here's what I see is that we don't have enough of them. So bookkeeping, if you have 401ks, IRAs, those sort of things, you should have a financial advisor. Your banker has something to do with finance, your life insurance agent, and your attorney. I think all of those roles are super important. Here's the thing that I see the most, Clay, is they don't work together. The rancher or the farmer, I'm going to go to my accountant and then I'm going to tell my accountant what my attorney said. And then I'm going to tell the attorney what the accountant said. And we get a lot of information lost in translation. And it's not just farmers, it's every business owner. Why are we not having a sit down meeting with that team at least once a year and saying, hey, this is what you mentioned to me. And so I can decipher what they're saying because I know their language. You may not know their language, but there has to be that team of people so that we don't have to know everything, but we need to know enough to be dangerous.
So would you include in that list a CPA? Or is that
accountant? Yeah.
Okay. So
did I not say accountant?
You said bookkeeper. You might have said it. I don't know.
Yes, accountant as well. I'm sorry.
You went fast and I wrote down what I could. So, but that was just, I wrote down what I could so that we could basically go back through and kind of talk about the role that each of them play. But kind of as a follow-up to what you just said, I think that one of the problems that you're talking about here is, and this is a agricultural illustration, that we become too siloed in our operations. And so, like you said, the bookkeeper isn't talking to the financial advisor, isn't talking to the banker, isn't talking to the insurance agent, isn't talking to the attorney, isn't talking to the accountant. And so at the end of the day, those people all work for you. Some of them probably work for you on an hourly basis, but I bet you would get the money back if you just said, hey, can we get everybody in the same room for a couple of hours at least once a year? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Totally. 100%. And especially, this is where I see it the most, is in an estate plan situation where you're talking to me because I'm your life insurance agent, but the attorney doesn't know life insurance. I just had this to happen last week. I had a client say, hey, I need an in-force illustration because we're estate planning and my attorney wants to see what the rate of return is. Like, this isn't universal life. This is whole life. And so the attorney doesn't know the language and is assuming that it is universal life because it's probably all they've seen, or that's what they're recommending. And they don't know what whole life is. They don't know why we would use term. And so when we're doing an estate plan, the farmer is the one having to bring this information, but they're not the life insurance agent. And why isn't the accountant in on that conversation as well? And everybody just allowing everybody to do their job and be neutral about it. It's like if you bring 5 professionals in a room, it seems to be that they all get their feathers ruffled as if one needs to be smarter than the other instead of working together. So I feel like we've gotten into this place where we are siloing the farmer and he has to do all the work and they have to do it one-on-one. And look at how much time it takes them. If there's 5 people on your team, that's 5 meetings. That's 5 hours when you could have did everything you needed to do in an hour or 2.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so back to that whole thing, we can probably get it done cheaper and it would be more effective if we would just put them all in the same room, at one time. So
ranchers hate being in meetings anyway.
Right. So,
but why are we in all these meetings?
Kill 5 birds with one stone. So let's talk about the roles of each of these individual players one at a time. And you started with bookkeeper, so we'll just start there. Is there a reason you started with bookkeeper? Whenever somebody gives me a list, I like to ask, is there a reason you started with number 1 where you did, or is it just the way they came to mind?
I think it's probably how they came to mind, but I do feel like your bookkeeper is most important because if you don't know your books, what can your CPA do? You're going to hand him a whole box of receipts at the end of the year. You think that's going to save you some money as he goes through the receipts and puts that all together for you? If you don't know your books, and granted, maybe you don't need to look at your books on a daily basis or on a monthly basis, but you should be. I mean, if you know anything about ranching for profit and anything about being profitable, you are going to want to look at your books. You're going to have to break them down. And if you hire a bookkeeper, so you can go and get QuickBooks or you can go and get some kind of software, are you going to separate every enterprise so that you know how much money are the cattle making? How much money are the horses making? How much money are we making baling hay versus just buying hay or hiring somebody to custom hay it? Break those enterprises down. That is not easy to do in a bookkeeping software. And so if you can hire somebody to even set it up for you so you can get those numbers in, and then for the love of Pete, stop using cash. Because guess what you do? You throw the receipt in the pickup on the dash, you open the window and it blows out and you don't have the receipt to give to the bookkeeper. Use your credit card for everything. That can all be auto downloaded and should be very inexpensive for you to do. But if we don't know, I mean, I can't tell you. People don't believe me, Clay, when I tell that. But the amount of people that I meet with that don't have a clue what their numbers are, and they just kind of, and they'll pull up their taxes. Okay, that's going to give us an idea, but there's depreciation on there. You try to get to 0. I want to know what it was before depreciation, and you should know what it was before depreciation. Should I buy that? Should I not buy that? Keeping your books is not only going to help the CPA, but your banker is going to love you as well, right? It's just, I feel like books are some of the most important things because it just makes your life much easier all the way around.
And so we've got the bookkeeper. Is that kind of based on the giftedness of the rancher himself, the level at which he needs a bookkeeper and how much of a role they play? Would you say that? Or is there a certain kind of bare minimum that you would encourage a bookkeeper to bookkeep?
Yeah, I think it would be situational,
yeah,
right? Like some farmers and ranchers, they're okay sitting in the office and looking at books. They might look at them every night, where the next guy's not going to look for 6 months. And so I would think that would just be based on the situation. But, I've talked about it on my podcast that there's this thing called financial PTSD. And so we are scared to look at our books because we've never had money. And so it doesn't matter how much money you have. Once you've never had that money, it's always scary to look at your books. And so if we can look and learn to get past the negative all the time, oh, we're not always operating in the red, we may actually want to look at our books.
For sure. No, I think that's a good point. And it goes back to what Wally Olson always says, know and understand yourself. Are you the bookkeeper? Is there somebody on your team that's the bookkeeper? Then that's fine. But if you're not, then don't leave it undone, basically, is what we're saying.
Yeah. I actually have t-shirts that say, God created you to be a rancher, not a bookkeeper. If you truly are the guy that wants to be outside feeding cows, moving cows, and it is painful for you to sit in the office, you shouldn't be in the office.
Do what you're best at. Do your best work. For sure. All right, let's move on to financial advisor. What is that? What is it not? I think that sometimes we have an idea of what these roles are, and maybe we're not really understanding what the role is. So what is a financial advisor?
These aren't my favorite people on earth, Clay. I mean, you're talking to me and I don't even like the stock market. So here's what a financial advisor is not. And this is what I see a lot in this industry. And I've heard this twice in the last couple of weeks. Oh, mom and dad went and talked to their financial advisor about estate planning. A financial advisor is not an estate planner. I am not an estate planner. I can give you key points, but you should not be basing your entire estate plan around what Mary Jo Irmen says, because I sold you some life insurance, right? You need to go to an attorney to talk about that. A financial advisor, I'm going to tick some people off here. If they're going to earn their keep, they're going to make you money, not lose you money. Financial advisors are only for the people that have money in the market. So a financial advisor to me is somebody that's managing an IRA or a 401k or a Roth or something like that. But they're actually managing it and not passively putting money there and allowing it to just do whatever the market does and you're supposed to hang in there. An advisor is looking at the economy. They're looking at the world economy. They're watching, they're looking at trends so that if the market's going to crash, you moved out of that market. You might have a marketing guide. You might look at your financial advisor as the guy that's marketing your grain, doing puts and calls and marketing cattle. That might be your financial advisor in that aspect if you don't have money in an IRA or something like that. And typically, these people aren't super important in farming because most farmers just put their money back in the farm. They're not putting it into anything else that is market driven. I mean, they're just trying to stay afloat. We don't have any extra money to be throwing it at an IRA.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that you bring up a good point there, because I think that sometimes that creates problems later on when we don't have anything to retire to, or we don't have anything to retire with. Then the land becomes our retirement plan. And that means Junior's got to buy it from the bank again, like you've talked about many times. And so I think that while maybe the financial advisor in the stock market, I think maybe you said even on our first episode, we did way back episode 1 of the Working Cows podcast, I think you said there that Nelson Nash said that they were going to use the stock market to steal people's wealth. That when it was created, that was one of the ways they were going to use that tool. And definitely, depending on when a crash hits, sometimes if it hits in bad timing for you, these 15 years are going to be pretty rough. And so now you are 70 all of a sudden and you're going to be 85 before it turns around. That's not a good scenario, right? So I think that while the stock market and financial advisors, say what you will about them, we still shouldn't be without a plan that allows us to retire without the next generation having to buy the ranch from the bank. Would you agree with that?
Yes. There should be an exit strategy of some sort. I don't care if it's Junior rents it from you and the rental is your income, but then his purchase price comes off his rent that he paid. Because he's going to have to rent land. If he didn't have his own, he's going to have to rent it from somebody. To me, that's a great idea. Just don't make him rent it, pay for your retirement, and then we get to buy it from the siblings again. Right. No, I just rented it for 30 years. So why am I buying it? But here's my take on farmers and ranchers in the market. There's a couple of things that I see. One, their money's in the market and then they go to the bank and they borrow money for operating, or they borrow money for equipment or cattle. Well, they're paying more in interest to the bank on that loan than they are making in that retirement account. Why? If you know ranching, why do you have money there? Or this actually just happened yesterday. I talked to a guy that he had a whole bunch of money in his IRA. So he didn't buy land because he's like, oh, I just don't have the money to buy the land. It's all sitting in his IRA. And it did what? Took a 20% hit last year when he could have bought the land and he would have had an entire another farm. And that farm's going to be worth more because he's like, it was on the edge of town. It could have been developed. Like, I just wasn't thinking until 30 days after the sale. I thought, oh my gosh, I have all this money sitting here. I could have drained that account and bought that land. Why are we putting money into a retirement account when we want to grow an operation? And then somebody might say, well, you need to have retirement because then the kids don't have to rent the ground from you. They don't have to buy it. You don't have to sell it. Farming is a risk. IRAs are a risk. Do we have anything where there's, which is where I come into the whole thing, right? Can we put something somewhere where there's some guarantees and we don't have to risk everything?
Right.
And when we need it, when commodities drop and we do need to go get that money, now we have a 10% penalty. So, it's no secret that I hate the stock market. Like, I have a whole chapter on it in the book, right? So there's no secret to that. It's not fitting. All these young people are putting money into IRAs because they have off the farm jobs, but they want to farm. Well, you got to wait till you're 59 and a half then.
Yeah.
If you don't want the penalty.
Right.
Or for the next pandemic so they can waive the penalty on $100,000.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing this podcast for 5.5 years now, and your message has remained the same. So consistency. All right.
It's funny because if I can just intercept here, I've been listening to a great podcast called Wealthion, and I believe it is very Austrian based from what I can tell. I found the guy from Robert Kiyosaki's podcast, so I'm going to guess that he's on that same line of thinking. But it's been interesting to hear these financial advisors, actual financial advisors, say you should not be in the market. You should have your money in bonds, in money market, in real estate. One of the guys that I listened to today on there bought farm ground because he figures that he's going to need to grow his own food. He's got solar panels, gold, silver. Like, when you're listening, and these guys have said, if you lost money in the market last year, it's because your advisor is a passive advisor. And he is not actually looking at what's happening in the economy. So even though I don't have any money in the market, it's been super interesting to listen to what's going to happen. And the fact that one of his advisors said, you don't get wealthy by putting money in the market. Warren Buffett did not get wealthy by putting his money in the market. He got wealthy by managing other people's money. Like, you create wealth by starting a business. You don't create wealth by putting money in the stock market. A financial advisor. I'm like, I like that guy. I can get behind that.
Yeah. And all this is really connected to episode 284 of the Working Cows podcast. I think that was it. Anyways, I'll look that up. It'll be in the show notes page for today. But John Haskell and I had a long conversation about this, that what is profit for in a business? It's for growing the business. And it's what you're saying is, you're a farmer, you're a rancher, you know land, you know cattle, you know crops. Invest in what you know and use the money you make to grow the business so that it can be bigger and do more of it next year, and just keep growing it and compounding it. And then once you've got a mature business, is kind of the language we used in that episode, then you can start to look at ways for an exit strategy. But don't necessarily just think, well, I'll take his name in vain. Dave Ramsey says, put the money in the stock market and hold out, it'll get better eventually. Don't just take his word for it. And I know he's made a lot of money and been successful, but again, maybe that's more on the financial advisor side of it. As far as
he's not actually a financial advisor. Did you know that?
No.
I just found this out. He's never held a license.
Oh.
There's a financial advisor in Iowa or something that he listens to Dave every day, and he just tears everything he says apart. And he actually has called the state that Dave lives in, and he has never held a life insurance license or a financial advisor's security license. It was interesting to hear that. But yeah, you're just supposed to stay and hold. But where did Dave make his money?
Real estate.
And creating a business.
Right.
Right? He has a business. He sells you a little purse with compartments so you can compartmentalize your money. I'll sell you the purse, but don't go spend unnecessary money. But the purse is necessary. The books are necessary. He's creating money because he has a business. He's a great businessman.
Yep.
He's great at having you manage your debt. But to create wealth, where is he on the creating wealth? Where is he teaching people that cash flow is king? Financial advisors are not teaching you how to create cash flow. And Ranching for Profit is cash flow. Your podcast is cash flow. All of these things we are talking about, the buy, sell, that's all cash flow. Like, it's all about creating cash flow. And that is not being taught on the financial advisor side. It's you buy and you pray. And let's hope that it's there when you retire.
Right. Yep. Let's just hope that crash isn't, like I said, in the 15-year cycle when you were hoping to have your feet in the sand and looking at a sunrise on the ocean, that. Yep. So I think that there's a proactive way to do this. So we talked about, we want to find a financial advisor who is managing money, because honestly, some of the most money ever made in the stock market is in a down market when people are shorting the market. So there was a way to make money over the last year or 2 years. I didn't make money in the stock market over the last year or 2 years, but apparently my investments are with a passive organization. And so that's the way that's working for me. But there are those out there, I guess, that you're saying that are actively watching the market and seeing opportunities to move money into different sectors or short the market or do whatever.
Yep. 100%. Go to the podcast. I don't know him. I just like the podcast.
Sure. So we've mentioned bookkeeper, financial advisor, banker. And again, this is becoming your own banker. This is farming without the bank. So what are we talking about here?
Yeah, but the banker is still important, right? We still need, at some point, we're going to need to leverage our money. At some point, ideally, we want to make the bank plan B, but right now they're probably plan A. So we need a bank that understands. We need a banker that understands what our goals are, that understands what we're doing. And a good banker is absolutely amazing. A good bank is amazing. Right now, I'm not hearing a lot of amazing things. And so here's something I told somebody yesterday. Is they switched banks because they had lower rates at one point. Well, guess what? This bank is not a farm ranch bank. And so now everything is getting tight in farming and ranching, and they're pulling out. And I've heard this over the last decade, is that when farming is good, every bank wants in. And then as soon as commodity prices drop, those banks pull out and say, you know what? No, thank you. We don't want farm business anymore. And so if you're going to go to a bank, it might not be a bad idea to stay with the bank that understands farming and ranching, even if their rates might be a little bit higher. And I've always said banks are painful to deal with. I don't particularly love them either because they ask stupid questions and they want all this information. But guess what? As soon as people start asking me to lend them money, I start asking those same questions. And I start sounding like a bank because I am lending money. So we have to understand that that's their business and they don't want your collateral. Banks do not want collateral. They want cash flow. They want your payment so that they can go turn and make more money on that payment. And that's why they do a 15-year note versus a 30-year note. Because the 15-year note is a higher payment. They can go to the feds and get more money, right? I mean, it's all fractional reserve banking. So they don't want the land. They don't want the cows. They don't want the tractor. They want the payment. So just make sure that you're working with a good one. And it's actually nice when I just had someone tell me this week, the banker gave his friend my book. The banker, the banker should actually love me because I'm saying, hey, pay attention to your numbers and pay your loans back to yourself. So if we're creating a pool of wealth for these farmers and ranchers, they can go to the bank and they look fantastic on paper then. because they've actually managed their money. And so the bank should actually like this concept, because now when they lend them money, they know they're good for it. So bankers are still important. They're still a part of what we do. It's just that we don't want them to control everything. It's a bad bank. It's a bad banker that ruins it. And there's not actually that many of them out there. It's not really good right now. It's scary, actually, right now, what's happening. I have had, yesterday was the third one that I've met with one-on-one outside of hearing stories on TikTok and Facebook. I had a guy yesterday that he's going to sell some land and he's going to pay down his note by $300,000 or $400,000. They won't let him just pay it down and recalculate his payment. They're making him refinance that, and they're going to raise his rate by 1%. And they told him, well, we have to. We're losing money on this. The rate's too low. And so this is the third time I've seen that in the last 6 months, probably. And that's scary, because that is a repeat of everything that happened in the 80s when interest rates went high and the banks wanted those loans to be at a much higher rate, because they're not making a ton of money, not compared to what they're borrowing from on the Fed side, right? And so the banks are great until they're not.
Yep. That relationship, I've heard that on an advertisement recently. That relationship is great until it's not. But I think we shouldn't miss what you just said there, because you said, what does the bank want? They want cash flow. What is the key to growing a business? It's cash flow. What are we managing? We're managing cash flow and using cash flow to grow businesses. So again, it's consistent. It's the way the world works. It's how money works, and we should know how money works, and then we should use it according to the way that money works and not try to make it do things that it doesn't do in the system. So banks want cash flow because they're businesses, and businesses use cash flow to grow and operate. They want your payment. They don't want your land. They don't want your cows. They want cash flow. They want the payment. So we're the same way. We need to look at it differently, though, because I don't think we often think of it that way. The next person you mentioned on the team is an insurance agent. Tell me about, you can buy surgery insurance for your pet. You can buy insurance for your blown up transmission. You can buy insurance for your plane ticket. So they'll sell you insurance for anything. What are we talking about when we say we need an insurance agent on a team?
You need a good P&C agent. So property casualty, make sure they understand. I used to be a P&C agent, and there's a lot of stuff to insure on a farm. And you better make sure that, do you have coverage for no rain? Do you have coverage for hail? Do you have coverage for, not just crop insurance, right? But do you have coverage for the snow that's going to collapse the roof on the building that the insurance agent didn't insure because he thought it was too old? And the insurance agent never actually came out to your farm and walked you through your policy and pointed out every single building, every single piece of equipment. Do you have an umbrella? I'd had several clients in the last couple of years that some person following the tractor was not patient enough. I just talked to one a couple of weeks ago that he actually ended up being sued and held accountable for a lady that passed him on a hill, hit somebody head on, and killed him. He was held liable because he did not have his lights on, and the sun was just starting to go down. So it was totally light out, but he did not have his tractor lights on. Thank goodness he had $1 million liability policy and an umbrella, because they used the entire liability and umbrella, I believe. Whatever it was. Make sure that your P&C agent is covering all those things. A lot of people don't know that they can have coverage on their cattle. They can have coverage for drought. And I get you could be premium to death, and a lot of people don't like that. But I've also talked to a lot of people that are in bankruptcy because they didn't have fire insurance and there was a fire. And so all of a sudden we lose our business, we lose our operation, whatever that might be. And so have a good P&C agent. And then, of course, have a good life insurance agent. And on that side, just call me. But make sure on the life insurance side, make sure you're not buying universal, variable, or indexed. Make sure that your person knows what the goals are in the future. I just talked to a lovely young lady yesterday They have a massive operation. It's a big family operation, and they have insurance on the aunt that owns part of the operation. And she told me, oh yeah, she's got a universal life policy. I'm like, oh, what? She's 78 years old. Like, she's got a universal life policy. We looked at the policy. It is 1 year away from collapsing. So they're not going to have any death benefit on her, but yet we've paid all this premium. They had absolutely no idea. And at the same time, they have whole life policies on the kids, and they've doubled in cash value. And the death benefit is phenomenal because they're good old fashioned whole life. I'm like, this is how it should work. This is why we don't buy the wrong product. And then they had term insurance on dad, who is 77. And guess what? He's insurable, but nobody can get him insurance. I could, but it's a single premium pay. Like, it's not going to be the best policy. And they had no idea that they weren't going to be able to do that. And don't go to your financial advisor for life insurance. Go to a life insurance agent. A financial advisor is just going to go, oh, what kind of rate of return can we get with that? It's not about that. It's about using it for estate planning. It's about making sure we can use it for banking if we want to. I mean, there's so many things encompassing that, but go to the expert, and the expert that also understands your industry. Oh my gosh. I honestly can say I have 0 doctors as clients because I've talked to some, but I'm not good at it because I don't get their industry. I don't understand the trusts that are set up and all the stuff that go with it. Please go to the expert that understands positions and what happens in their industry. I'm not that expert. And so making sure that your banker understands what you do, your P&C agent and your life insurance agent, everybody on that team better understand farming and ranching.
Yeah, very good. That insurance agent, again, back, all these people work for you. Ultimately, they work for you. And maybe it'll cost you a little more, but I'm sure it'll save you some because your insurance on your livestock is a number that you probably haven't updated in a few years. And you could move it one way or the other and make it work. And like you said, walk around the property, say, this is covered for this much in the event of these catastrophes. This is what we're going to be able to do for you. And kind of know some of those things so that you're not surprised. So
let me just add this. If you have a business on the farm, make sure that that business is covered through your personal policy. Because if I drive into your yard and you're selling direct to consumer beef and I get hurt and I was there to pick up beef, you probably have no liability insurance for that because a business and the farm are 2 completely separate things to your insurance company. So I operate my business on my farm. And so I have to make sure that my farm liability is extended to my business or my businesses. And so make sure that you're asking your P&C agent that.
Is whole life the insurance product as far as life insurance is concerned in your recommendation? Or are there others that should also play a role in people's financial plan?
I think it comes down to 2 things, term and whole life, and those 2 only.
Right.
Because the other ones are proving to collapse and underperform, and people are dying without insurance that they've paid for.
Okay. And the term, like I've got term insurance. Term is good for a few years, basically, but it's a lower premium and the policy will lapse or you will collect if you die within the term, basically.
Correct.
Whole life is what we've talked about multiple times, what your book, which people should read, is all about, and structuring that in such a way that you can use it as a cash flow strategy. That's correct. That's what we're talking about.
Yep. So here's the difference. So term has its place though too, Clay, because I do a lot of term, but it's convertible term. So that means that at some point we can convert it to whole life and you don't have to go through a health exam. So like you have a term, but if we find out you have cancer in 3 years, you can convert that to whole life without a health exam. They can't deny you coverage. So they're taking some risk there. And so if I do term insurance, it's always convertible, and we're doing it for a reason because we maybe don't have the money right now for whole life, but we're going to have it in the future. And then when you get into permanent insurance, there's really 4 kinds, and there's whole life, universal life, variable universal life, and indexed universal life. So whole life, all of your cost of insurance is all wrapped up into the premium. That's all figured in for the rest of your life. It is a guaranteed product. It's never going to go down. The fees aren't going to go up. The premium's not going to go up. Cash value is going to grow. And because we're using a mutual company, you get a dividend. So you get some shares of the company. Okay. That's whole life. It's very, very safe. Universal life, that's a chassis. And so the universal life chassis is basically renewable term insurance, but none of the costs and the fees are wrapped up into the policy and none of them are guaranteed. So what's happening is they go up in cost every year and the premium is based off of some sort of rate of return of the market or some kind of cap rate in an IUL. And what's happening is the market is underperforming and we bought insurance like we were going to Walmart. We didn't want to overpay. And so we're seeing that those policies are actually going bad because the cost of insurance is eating up the cash value and the companies don't tell you that. So I think they're criminal to even be sold. Now, people have told me, Mary Jo, there's a place for them. What if I have a bunch of money and I want life insurance, but I also want to play the market? Well, then do it with an IRA and a separate policy. Like, I just do not see any benefit. Here's another thing that a lot of estate planners do that drives me crazy. A second to die policy. So they might do whole life, but it's a second to die. So Clay, you and your wife are both insured under one policy, but it only pays out when the last one dies. So you essentially paid for two people, but they only had to pay death claim on one. So why don't we just buy the policy on the person we want the money on? You don't get it when the first person dies. You get it when the second person dies. And so, and then they're averaging health. So it's sort of like Obamacare, right? So you're really healthy. I'm not so healthy. So we're going to give you an average health rating. So let's say you were supposed to pay 3 cents for every dollar of death benefit because you're healthy. I'm supposed to pay 7 cents. So what happens is we average that. Maybe it's 5. Well, now I died first, but you still get to pay 7 cents, even though I'm dead for 10 years before you. The life insurance companies make out on those. And if it's in an estate plan, if dad passes first, we want the money when dad passes, not when mom passes, because we might want to buy mom out. We might have to take over operating. So why didn't we just insure dad? I don't know why people use them. I've yet to see a purpose for them. I've asked people to run those by me because I'm totally open-minded to it. I don't have the arrival syndrome around it. I just have yet to really see the purpose to why wouldn't we just buy 2 separate policies or one policy on the person we want it on.
Next up on our list, team members, is the attorney. And you've mentioned a couple of times as well, estate planner. Is that a separate role from all the others, or is this a subset of one of these team members we've mentioned so far?
Yeah, I guess if you really break it down, there should be a couple of them. So you might want to have your litigation attorney. I mean, hopefully you don't ever need them, but I mean, nobody goes and looks for them until they need them, right? And then you have, if you're setting up LLCs and corporations and S Corps and C Corps, please use an attorney. Do not use your accountant because the accountant's going to send the paperwork in, but guess what they're not going to do? They're not going to set up all of your documents that actually show that you are a corporation. And so when you get sued, you are not going to be treated like a corporation. So have your meeting minutes, have all those things. Use an attorney for that. And then not many attorneys dub as both. I just got off the phone with a client that uses an estate attorney and that's all she does. She does nothing else because she said, this is what I'm good at. And it's an ironclad trust. It's an ironclad estate plan. There's no coming back out of it. And so I think even more important than your S Corp, C Corp, of course, in North Dakota, we can't be corporate farmers. So we don't see it a lot here. Around the country, there's a lot of that. But you need to have an attorney for the estate plan and a good one that understands trusts, one that understands what you want, that all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. Nobody can come back and contest anything, change anything. Make sure if your trust is going to own something, that you can still access it if you need. And there's a difference too, I guess, between estate planners and your succession planners. So your estate planner is going to be your attorney. Your succession planner might be somebody that's not an attorney, but they're the mediator between both of you. And at some point, you might want the succession planner as well, because they might just be able to put it in English or be able to give you more ideas and save you money, because you're not having to pay the high rate to meet with the attorney, and they're not charging as much per hour. Like your Jolene Browns and those kind of people that can come in as that mediator and then get all those other people to meet at the same time. So I do think that there's different areas of that.
Right. Yep. And the succession planner is one that's more about helping with communication between the family members and setting a strategy and saying, make sure that we're actually all on the same page and this is what we want to do. And then I would say maybe the estate planner is providing some framework for that discussion, but really they kind of come in at the back end and say, okay, this is the plan we made, and this is the legal document that says this is what we're going to do. And these are the binding agreements that we're all agreeing to. And so those are kind of some of the roles that those people are playing. Yeah, that's real helpful. I appreciate that. And then finally, I think the one that we came back to is CPA, the accountant. We've mentioned him a couple of times. A couple of things that I think that always should be said as far as accountants are concerned. A lot of times the accountant will be trying to help you avoid taxes, and sometimes avoiding taxes is a bad business decision. Sometimes you will buy unnecessary things or spend money on depreciating assets that could have been reinvested into the business in a different way. And so that's something that should be said, as well as that the accountant, sometimes if all they're focused on is helping you avoid taxes, there could be some missed opportunities there, I think maybe is the most delicate way I can put that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I've actually been talking about this a lot lately, that people think I hate bankers, and I don't hate bankers. I actually like bankers, but I have more frustration with accountants than I do with bankers, because accountants don't seem to understand cash flow, right? And it all comes back to cash flow, and they don't understand how to run a business. Ironically, like, you think that your accountant should understand how to run a business, and we're taking business advice from somebody that's trying to avoid taxes. Why? Was that a good business decision? You'll hear farmers and ranchers say a lot, well, the accountant told me I had to go buy something to avoid taxes. The banker told me that I could borrow the money. And now we're mad at the banker because the banker is asking for the money, when in fact, the accountant gave you horrible advice and you wrote the check and made that ultimate decision. And so it comes back to you to have to know a little bit about everything. But if your accountant is just trying to get you to zero and he's not looking out 4, 5, 6, 7 years to that payment, it's amazing to me how, you can go buy that tractor or you can go buy that 1-ton pickup and we can depreciate it in 1 year. But did the accountant actually look at your books to say, we can't make that payment for the next 7 years? If things go bad, we're not going to have 7 years to pay for that tractor. We're not going to have 5 years to pay for those cows. And almost always your bookkeeper is going to probably be the one to go to. The accountant in a lot of situations is nothing more than a paper pusher. And I'm probably going to tick off a lot of accountants. But if you're a good accountant, you will be looking and giving advice and saying, don't be buying that, because look at how tight you were. You don't need that. Or maybe you do need it, but it's not a want, it needs to be a need. And I have ran into quite a few accountants that think that way lately. So there, it gives me some hope. But a lot of this industry is in the position it's in because of accountants.
Yeah. The story that Dallas Mount always tells is when he was teaching the High Plains Ranch Practicum, they had the guy that was, I think, in charge of the largest Caterpillar machinery dealership in Wyoming, and you think about Caterpillar machinery in Wyoming is coal mining. So there, it's a pretty sizable business. And he said one of the things that he learned in business is if it's not a good business decision, it's not a good tax decision, that we shouldn't be making business decisions based on tax avoidance. And another witness to call to the stand in this regard is John Haskell, who said somewhere in the neighborhood of high 5 figures is where you start to worry about those taxes. Before then, we're probably not going to worry too much about the taxes. We're going to pay them and we're going to keep growing the business. So,
and here's my thing. Like, I pay a lot of money in taxes and I'm over the 5 figures, and I'm like, okay, if I buy that, it better create cash flow for me. And so if it creates cash flow, I have more taxes to pay. And so I have to justify that piece of it, right? Like, okay, I should buy that rental property or I should buy that ground, but I'm not buying it to go backwards because it's a horrible business decision. Yet we do that because we don't want to pay taxes, and then we don't pay taxes, and then we cry that we don't get Social Security. Well, you didn't get Social Security because you didn't pay taxes. Like, it all comes back around. And granted, Social Security is its own topic, but I always say this too. If you were driving by John Deere, Case IH, Caterpillar, I don't care who it is, blue, green, yellow. If you're driving by and they have those, those big like floppy signs that are in the wind, and it says 10% off, 12% off on anything you buy today, are you going to stop in there? Most people will say, no, it's only 12% off. Well, guess what? Most of you are in a 12 to 14% tax bracket. So that's all you're saving. But the government is giving these guys this huge sale every year. And so if you wouldn't do it because it's not enough off, you're doing it anyway without even really thinking about it. So many people think, well, the highest tax bracket is 37%. Most farmers are not in a 37%. They're lucky to be in a 24% tax bracket. And so when you're in a 14% tax bracket, you're only saving 14% of the cost of that item. You are not saving the entire cost of that item.
Right. Yep. Ultimately, what is the goal of making a year-end purchase to avoid taxes? It's to make you look like you failed at your business. It's to make you look like you didn't make any money last year so that you don't pay taxes. And then, like you said, at the end of the day, we've got 5 more years of that same payment coming up that we've got to figure out how to make, or 7 years or whatever the amortization schedule is. We've got to make that payment for all of those future commitments we've made. And so we need to pay attention to that and make sure that it's a good decision, that it's going to help us grow the business ultimately.
Look at what people say about Trump, and love him, hate him, I frankly don't care. But, oh, he's a horrible businessman. He filed bankruptcy. Okay, but he was trying to avoid taxes, right? Like, he buys things to avoid taxes. If I filed in a negative amount every year and I said, geez, I never make money. I never make money. Would you think that you should do business with me? Probably not. And we in this industry feel like that's a badge of honor. And we did a good job by not making money. This is funny. I talked to a dairyman a few months back. Clay, a profit of $3 million a year in the dairy industry. And I said, what in the world? I said, you're not buying things to avoid taxes, are you? And he said, no. He said, my dad read Robert Kiyosaki's book years ago. And he said, we don't buy anything unless it produces cash flow. If that tractor is not going to produce cash flow, we're not buying it. And they have 0 operating notes, 100% cash, making $3 million a year. And they're not some big, massive operation. I mean, they're a big operation, but they don't have this huge overhead. And if all of us thought like that, is that tractor going to create cash flow? Create cash flow. Not, oh, it pays for itself and we get to break even. Are you custom farming with it? Because if you are, that's creating cash flow. Can we do other things that make that money up? Even being debt free. The bum on the street is debt free, begging for cash flow, right? He's begging you because he needs cash flow to go buy food. Cash flow is key. It doesn't matter what you're in. That's where we need to be making our money.
Yep. So back to ranching for profit principles, it should pay for itself in a year. Basically, any of these business expansion or business, we should be able to make the money we spent on it back in 1 year. That's one of the rules of thumb. Another one is Dave Pratt called them monuments to tax avoidance. That we've got these pieces of equipment sitting out in the brush row they're overgrown. There's a tree growing through the middle of them because they've been there since we bought them and we've never used them. They're just a monument to tax avoidance. And so I think that those are some of the things that we need to have our paradigm shifted on some of these things. And I think that all these come down to, ultimately, success in all of these come down to communication. It's kind of where we started. It's where I'd like to end, is get these people in the same room, make them work for you, and talk to all of them about your strategy, and then say, how are we all going to play as part of a team, not just individual players, not just siloed crops held separate from the rest of the crops. How are we all going to work together as a team to accomplish this goal that I have shared with you, because you all ultimately work for me. So anything else, Mary Jo, anything we missed or something else that needs to be said in regard to this subject? Anything you want to promote or anything you got coming up that you want to share?
No.
Buy the book, read it.
Buy the book, get on the schedule. I'm booked out till the end of April at this moment. And so it's been absolutely crazy over here. Crazy good. But we're now going to get into planting season and people are going to say, Mary Jo, I can't meet with you. I know. I just need an hour. I just need an hour.
Very good. Very good. Well, Mary Jo, thank you again for your time today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. As always, if you guys need anything, if you need to reach out to me, please do. MaryJo@withoutthebank.com. If you have a meeting set and you are 6 to 8 weeks out, I thank you very much for waiting. I really do appreciate that you guys are waiting for me. But we do have a cancellation list. So if you wanted to get on that cancellation list, email us, MaryJo@withoutthebank. Let us know. We'll get you on the list. And sometimes people no-show. So if you guys have your numbers ready and you can jump into a meeting in 5 minutes, that would be absolutely fantastic in case there is a no-show. Haven't had any of those lately, but just in case. If you haven't got the book, you know where to go. farmingwithoutthebank.com. Grab the book, and then we'll talk to you in the meeting. Enjoy your book. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Farming Without the Bank podcast. We hope today's episode has inspired you to take control of your finances in new ways. Don't forget to check out our website, farmingwithoutthebank.com, and engage with us on our Facebook page, Farming Without the Bank. Join us next week as we smash more financial myths and empower you to accomplish your financial goals.